This article is going to discuss learning styles, concepts, and evidence by Harold Pashler, Mark McDaniel, Doug Rohrer, and Robert Bjork. Christina Albert, Sarah Bruce, and Erin Wallace put this presentation together. There is a quote found in this article that pretty much sums everything up, and it says, if classification of students' learning styles has practical utility, it remains to be demonstrated. The introduction to this particular article involves learning styles and the concept of how different people learn in different ways. One thing that was interesting is how the concept of learning styles has been heavily promoted, actively promoted by vendors, offering different types of tests, different assessment devices, and different online technologies to help educators and teachers try and identify their students' learning styles and try to develop their lesson plans accordingly to appeal to those different learning styles. The author analysis of learning style concept, there were two tasks that were set forth. Task one being to analyze the concepts of learning styles to determine what forms of evidence would be needed to justify basing pedagogical choices on assessments of students' learning styles. Trying to figure out how people know that these students have different learning styles that a teacher would need to cater her lessons to or his lessons to. How do we really know that this is working or this is to be true? And then the second task of this article or this study would be to review the literature to see whether or not the evidence actually exists. And then their determination to find what, if any, sufficient evidence to support the learning styles concept. So the authors wanted to address an overview of learning styles. There's the concept of learning styles that encompasses not only a large body of written materials, but also what seems to be a lucrative set of commercial activities, different things that students can do outside of a regular classroom. Commercial activities would consist of publishing and selling of measurement devices to help teachers assess individual learning styles. They could the devices could fall into different categories, different tests, different programs that a student could go through. Testing has also been recommended by organizations at all levels of education that might be presumed to base their recommendations on evidence. That if you test a student, that their particular behavior or achievement level on a test would put them in a specific learning style category. The concept of learning styles is actually embraced in a number of current educational psychology texts. For instance, Amrod in 2008 wrote that some cognitive styles and dispositions do seem to influence how and what students learn. Some students seem to learn better when information is presented through words, also known as verbal learners, whereas others seem to learn better when it's presented through pictures, also known as visual learners. So therefore, you have, whenever you're presented with information like this, educational psychology students and new teachers are being taught that students have particular learning styles and that these styles should be accommodated by instruction tailored to those learning styles. Although the purpose of this article is to determine if there is any literature or research to back up these ideas. Popular schemes include the Done and Done learning model, the Honey and Mumford Learning Style Questionnaire, Observational Primary Assessment of Learning Style, also known as OPAL, Kolb's Learning Style Inventory, and a learning style inventory produced by the Hay Group. The assessment devices that have been developed in relation to the Done and Done learning model are popular and extensive. Customers can go to the website on the International Learning Styles Network, and it states here that learning style is the way in which each learner begins to concentrate on, process, absorb, and retain new and difficult information. The interaction of these elements occurs differently in everyone. Therefore, it is necessary to determine what is most likely to trigger each student's concentration, how to maintain it, and how to respond to his or her natural processing style to produce long-term memory and retention. To reveal these natural tendencies and styles, it is important to use a comprehensive model of learning style that identifies each individual's strengths and preferences across the full spectrum of physiological, sociological, psychological, emotional, and environmental elements. A lot of these particular learning style questionnaires and models and inventories cost a pretty good penny. They, let's see, it says a summer certification program is also offered in connection with the OPAL, the Observational Primary Assessment of Learning Style, at $1,225 per trainee, excluding meals and lodging. So you have to be trained in how to assess a student's learning style. Then there's also a higher level certification for conducting research on learning styles, also offered for an additional $1,000. The Done and Done assessment instrument for adults asks respondents to indicate, for example, whether they learn best when they hear a person talk about something, as opposed to wanting to look at a particular picture. So the cost associated with this to get the materials needed is pretty lucrative for the people that are involved. The widespread appeal of learning style theory, the article addresses the origin and popularity of the concept of people wanting to foster learning and instruction, how they want to feel unique. People kind of want to know what makes them tick, and people want to have things that are easy for them. They don't really want to work hard unless they have to. So this article addressed the fact that the whole concept of having something catered to your specific need is extremely popular. It happens that you will classify people into groups, not necessarily on different dimensions. C.G. Jung, Myers-Briggs type indicator test, where they're grouped into occupational decisions. What somebody wants to do is for a particular career field, that it provides information that is said to be helpful in making decisions as to what they want to do as far as a job. It seems to be that, finding out what type of person somebody is has that, that appeal that everybody wants, because they want to be able to fit in somewhere. Also, teachers and students alike, they want to be treated as a unique individual. Teachers want to make their students feel that they aren't just a number, and that they do actually care about their education. Learning potential is seen as easier, or said to be seen as easier and more effective only if the instruction is fit to the person's learning style. That if you make somebody work a little bit harder, they may not learn as easy, and they may not learn as much if they have to work a little bit harder for that particular piece of information. There's also the idea that having or not having a particular learning style that you appeal to, that if you don't perform, or the students don't perform the way that they're supposed to, then if they're not succeeding in school, then it may be more comfortable for the person to think that it's the education system as opposed to the person. Schools are seen as a scapegoat for low or no achievement whenever they're not catering to a specific learning style. There is a section here that talks about the interactions of individual differences and instructional methods, that the differences in educational backgrounds can be an important consideration in the optimization of instruction. That students come from different places, students come from different, transfer from different schools, and that right there may be an indicator of how you may or may not be able to optimize different levels of instruction, not just necessarily the learning style theory. There is the evidence of validity about this particular concept. The existence of study preferences. If given a choice, people will choose their preferred mode of learning and studying. That if somebody prefers to read something, then they will ask to have something printed out, and if you've given a choice, that's what they would choose. Massa and Mayer have 3 instruments for assessing people's preferences. Those particular instruments are not exactly discussed in this article, but it does say that Massa and Mayer found significant correlations between the instruments they used to assess people's preference for certain kinds of representations and the mode of elaboration people elected to receive in the electronics lesson. The learning styles hypothesis states that it claims that learning will be ineffective if learners receive instruction that does not take into account their learning style. A specific version would be that instruction should be provided in the mode to match the learner's style. With all the information and or educational literature based on learning styles, and that the idea that instruction should be provided in the mode that matches the learner's style, that the whole idea of a meshing hypothesis is presented, that a presentation should mesh with the learner's own proclivities. The authors of this article sought out to state that if learning style hypothesis as defined as a claim that learning will be ineffective if learners receive instruction that does not take into account their learning style, if that's true, and could be true without the meshing hypothesis being true, that, for example, if individuals classified as visual learners profited more from verbal instruction in some situations, or if individuals classified as verbal learners profited more from visual instruction. They searched for evidence for both the broad version of the learning styles hypothesis and the more specific meshing hypothesis. The evaluation of learning styles literature looked at style by treatment interactions, that there is a considerable amount of information on learning styles and classroom instruction, but evidence-based results are fairly limited. A study must satisfy several criteria. First, on the basis of some measure or measure of learning styles, learners must be divided into 2 or more groups. Second, subjects within each learning style group must be randomly assigned to one of at least 2 different learning methods. And then third, all subjects must be given the same test of achievement. Fourth, and the results need to show that the learning method that optimizes test performance of one learning style group is different than the learning method that optimizes the test performance of a second learning style group. Styles of learning and thinking, they matter in instruction and assessment. In this study, they took gifted and talented high school students and divided them into 3 groups: high analytical, high creative, and high practical. The participants were enrolled in an introductory psychology course and randomly assigned to class meetings that emphasized analytical instruction, creative instruction, practical instruction, or memory instruction also being the control condition. They found the participants who received instruction that corresponded to their strongest ability outscored students who received instruction that did not correspond to their strongest ability. The problems with the styles learning study that was conducted is that the mean scores were not reported for every condition. The interaction is attained only after outliers are removed, and the outliers were excluded but never actually explained. Learning style studies. These studies used appropriate methods but did not provide any support for the learning style hypothesis. Testing the ATI hypothesis, should multimedia instruction accommodate verbalizer or visualizer cognitive styles? Should these different types of instruction make sure that they appeal to spoken and visual learners? The lack of interaction between sensing intuitive learning styles and problem first versus information first instruction, a randomized crossover trial. These particular studies, it says that that they believe are aptitude by treatment interactions, also known as ATIs, refer to the interaction between a student's ability and the different types of course content. Early representations of ATI were unsuccessful because the treatment intervals were too short. Imagine taking a student's writing ability and then asking them to perform in a math class over the span of 2 weeks. More attention is given to interactions that include the extent to which the teaching method provides sufficient structure or guidance for the learner. The primary hypothesis behind ATI states that students with high ability tend to fare better in less structured learning environments than highly structured learning environments. By contrast, students with low ability are hypothesized to fare better with instruction that is highly structured and provides explicit guidance than with instruction that is less structured and provides little guidance. The support for the primary hypothesis comes from Freebody and Tyre in 1985, where they examined 6th grade students who participated in one of the 2 school-wide reading programs. Standardized tests were used to assess the students' abilities. Their reading test scores at the end of the school year was used as the outcome measure. Predicted outcomes from their assessment showed that students with low ability would have better performance rates in the structured reading program than in the less structured reading program, while students with high ability would have better performance rates in the less structured setting. Arguments against the primary hypothesis show that aptitude does not always interact with the instructional methods. Students with higher ability will perform better than students with lower ability, regardless of the type of instruction. The personality by treatment interactions indicate the locus of control is a personality measure that centers on an individual's beliefs about whether or not successes or failures are a result of internal or external influences. The internal locus of control indicates the belief that outcomes are a consequence of one's own actions. An external locus of control reflects the belief that outcomes are unrelated to one's own actions. It is hypothesized that students with an internal locus of control may perform better with less structured tasks than with highly structured tasks, while learners with an external locus of control will perform better with highly structured tasks than with less structured tasks. The personality by treatment interactions, the evidence that is shown to support this hypothesis is lacking. Previous studies that claim to support the hypothesis have not been reliable. Several conclusions were made by these authors. One being interventions built around learning styles would be very costly. Students would need to be assessed and then grouped by their learning styles. Specialized instruction would need to be provided to each group. Teachers would need to undergo additional trainings. Valid instructional activities would need to be created for each learning style. And the search for learning styles literature only revealed fragments of evidence to validate the use of learning style assessments. There is no adequate support for the use of learning style assessments in schools. When using the appropriate research designs, studies found evidence that contradicted the learning style hypothesis. Conclusions, continued on this slide, state that there is a lack of validity in learning style methods. The focus should actually be on developing learning style measures and interventions that can complement group sorting measures and achieve reliable group by treatment interactions. This quote that Pashler uses in 2008 states, "The belief that learning style assessments are useful in educational contexts appears to be just that, a belief, that there is no solid research to back up the concept of learning styles and the fact that it sounds good and seems to work occasionally in different areas or certain areas." And then you also have many people trying to sell their products that cater to this concept. A lot of the things that teachers tend to do lately are not necessarily research-based, and this article goes to show that the learning style theory is just that, a theory.